Good evening and welcome to the Burbank Police Commission for Wednesday, November the 17th, 2021. I'd like to mention before we do roll call that the public comment period is coming up. To speak during that period, please give a call to 818-238-3335. The city staff will answer the phones and announce speakers in real time to the chair when the public comment period begins. And now can we do our roll call? Sherry?
Chair Chapman,
Here?
Commissioner Coombs,
Here.
Commissioner Ellman, Commissioner Ellman, is your mic on?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Foruzen,
Here.
Commissioner Hagopian,
Present.
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
Commissioner Turner.
Here.
Good. And now we're going to do our flag salute, and Lieutenant Derek Green, who is on our watch command, will be leading us in our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Lieutenant. Now we're moving on to our commission announcements and reporting out by commission subcommittees. Commissioner Habakobian, would you like to go first this evening?
Sure. Actually, is it okay if Commissioner Coombs goes before me? He has something to report.
Sure. I'd be happy to. Is that okay, Commissioner Chapman?
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. So during this past month, I've continued to listen to some of the NACOL recordings. I haven't been able to catch them live. And Commissioner Chapman, I was also able to, I'm almost through the book that you provided me that was actually written by somebody who initially has helped establish NACOL as well. So that's been really helpful for my kind of orientation to the work that we're doing. I am privileged to participate in a series of meetings that actually were set up by Commissioner Hakobian and Together We Can to address a very organized community response to concerns about traffic safety and street racing. I believe Commissioner Hakobian will be providing more information on that, but kudos to him for organizing that series of meetings. And I just want to give a thank you to Ms. Nakamura for the invitation to Monday's wreath laying ceremony that my son and I were able to attend.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Commissioner Habakobian?
Thank you, Commissioner Chapman. Just to add more detail to what Commissioner Coombs was saying, I spoke with the founders of Together We Can. I believe Dory was the first contact that I had, and her biggest concern was street racing, and she asked to see if there's anything that we can do as police commissioners of the community. So luckily, I built a lot of wonderful relationships in the community, and I reached out to West Coast Customs, a gentleman by the name of Ian Lavelle. He's the current chief operating officer for West Coast Customs. And I asked him if they would be interested in doing some type of PSA and working with this group. And they said, absolutely. So we were able to set up a conversation. I believe they spoke with them on Friday, and it looks like the PSA is moving forward, and they're getting the CEO. I believe his name is Ryan. I can't pronounce his last name. And I believe he's a public figure. Everyone sees him on MTV's Pimp My Ride. Oh, they used to back in the day. So he's going to be doing the public PSA, and that's going to go out everywhere. And the city's PIO department is going to be involved in that as well, and helping translate that into different languages. And also, Commissioner Coombs and I attended the meeting with Burbank Water and Power because the Together We Can group asked us if there's anything that we can do as far as getting information into the utility bill. And we had a conversation with Burbank Water and Power on Monday with some of the lieutenants from BPD, and Sergeant Brimway, Lieutenant former, and I believe it was Sergeant Stone. And BWP said we're really excited about the project, and they're going to be, they have a newsletter that goes out every month, and they're going to put an ad in there, which will, information that will come from the PD that will talk about the laws behind street racing, the consequences, and we're going to target it towards, the parents so they get the education as well, to educate these young children. So that's what we've come up with so far, and everyone's excited about it, so we're definitely moving forward with that. And just to give a quick brief report about activity in the community, today I attended the ribbon cutting, the Burbank Chamber's ribbon cutting at Lincoln Brewing Company, and I also attended the Hilton Garden event on 11/12/2021, supporting the Social Impact Center, brought to you by the Burbank YMCA. I also attended on 11/09/2021, City Attorney Amy Abbal's retirement party at Gordon Biersch. And on November 6th, I attended the Burbank Coordinating Council's gala. And that's all I have to report.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Frusen? Commissioner Frusen?
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to take a chance to remind everybody, all the folks at home, that the Burbank Police Department community survey is still open for a few more days. So please take a few minutes to share your thoughts and let your voice be heard. And thank you to the department for being so responsive to my question at the last meeting and providing that survey in Spanish and Armenian as well, making it accessible to a lot more of our residents. And also wanted to thank Ms. Nakamura for the invitation for Monday's memorial event for Burbank Police Department's fallen officers that I was able to attend as well. I also attended one of the city's two community meetings around the homelessness plan and updating that. So it was kind of a overview of what the city has been doing so far, as well as soliciting community input on changes to make in the new plan that is in formulation right now. And there will be more opportunities for the public to engage there as well. And then lastly, our outreach subcommittee, which is myself and Commissioners Ellman and Commissioner Hakobian, we were able to check in. We had a few logistical issues, but we did. We were able to finally check in. And I'll just say that on my part, I'm moving forward with partnering with Burbank Police Department to figure out how we can partner better on their social media, if possible. And then also working on creating a shared calendar for us as commissioners where we can track, community events that would be beneficial to have one or more commissioners to attend, like the ones that Commissioner Kobian mentioned, or the city's homelessness plan meeting and all those kinds of things. And I don't know if Commissioners Hakobian or Ellman, if you want to share the pieces that you that you're working on or plan to work on.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Farzan. You pretty much said it all. So I really appreciate that report. Thank you again.
All right. Is there anyone else, Commissioner Ellman? No? Okay. I did want to mention that I attended the memorial that they had for Officer Colson and Officer Matt Kavelka on Monday as well. And it is such an important event that they hold each year to remember the fallen officers from our department. We remember our military on Memorial Day and Veterans Day. This is the day that they remember these gentlemen. Now, we're going to be ready for oral communications, and let me mention once again, the public comment period will be upcoming. To speak during that period, please call 818-238-3335, and staff will answer the phones when you call. And do we have any calls on the line now? Not yet. Okay. We can wait a few moments here. Again, that number is 818-238-3335. Okay. All right. It doesn't look like we have anybody at this time. We can, I think, go ahead and, whoops. I'm sorry, we do have a call. Just one moment here.
Our next caller is Dory, and Dory, you're live with the Police Commission.
Hi, it's Dory Foster from Together We Can. I wanted to thank the commissioners and the police department for allowing us to have this public comment, and really calling in to say a big thank you to Commissioner Hacobian for his introductions, as he spoke about earlier, with West Coast Customs and BWP, which resulted in really two very productive meetings in this past week, as he had mentioned. A little bit more about what came out of our meeting with West Coast Customs here in Burbank. We came out of that meeting with them agreeing to film the PSA, so they're really going to do a lot for us to do this on driver safety. They're donating their time. They have an in-house studio to film this, and the owner that was mentioned, Ryan, I think it's Friedling House, he will be in the PSA as well. They will also be reaching out to a local insurance company, and we plan on reaching out to probably Sergeant Stone, so get ready, and just to talk about how we can incorporate how your insurance will be affected, as well as data from our police department. So we're really excited to be able to be getting that message out. It's really important to be educating our community and really speaking to this community with people who they really respect, and hopefully it'll have a big impact. And then it was huge to have that connection with our BWP, to be able to use their resources to get newsletters out with all of this information to a large majority of Burbank very quickly is going to be amazing. So, it is the goal of Together We Can to bring our community members and officials together so that we can continue to make the progress like we did this week towards making our streets safer and stopping the reckless driving we see every day. So again, thank you. And if you want to keep updated on our progress, please email togetherwecanburbank@gmail.com. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for calling. Do we have any other callers? Okay. No more callers at this time. All right. Now is the time for commission response to public comments. Commissioner Habakobian.
Thank you, Commissioner Chapman. I just want to take this time to thank Dory from Together We Can for all the incredible work that they're doing. It's just a pleasure to be able to facilitate those conversations and try to bring something positive to the community. So to them, big kudos for what they're doing. They're doing a lot of wonderful work, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes from all these wonderful things. So thank you.
Good. Commissioner Coombs?
Thank you. I just wanted to second the kudos to Dory, Lisa, and Yolanda with Together We Can, as well as Commissioner Hakobian, who is a connector in the community, and I'm really excited to see what's going to come of a lot of this effort.
Excellent. Anyone else? All right. Then we'll move on with the approval of the minutes from the October 20th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner Coombs?
I'll motion to approve the minutes from the October meeting.
All righty. And do we have a second? Commissioner Liu? Commissioner Liu seconds the motion. Yep. Any discussion? Okay. And then can we vote by raising our right hand to approve the minutes from October 20th? Excellent. Minutes so approved. Then the next item of business is going to be a presentation and discussion on procedures, interventions, and challenges faced by officers responding to domestic violence incidents. And this evening's presentation is going to be by Lieutenant Derek Green. Lieutenant, thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you again. It's been a while. And to the new commissioners, nice to meet you. I'm Lieutenant Derek Green. I'm currently assigned to the Patrol Division. I'm one of 4 watch commanders. And I was asked to provide an overview of our response to domestic violence incidents. So my part will be primarily focused on patrol's response at the field level. And then I'll hand it off to Detective Christiana Sanchez, who will briefly cover some of the steps that are taken by the detectives once they receive a case. I wanted to preface it by saying that, these domestic violence incidents are all very unique in that they're emotionally charged, volatile, very dynamic incidents. So the information contained in this presentation is really just the basics, a basic overview. It's meant to provide what an incident would, what steps we would take on a basic domestic violence investigation, but they're not exhaustive lists. Each case is different. So we'll go ahead and begin. So I'll start by just defining what domestic violence is and how it differs from a regular assault on a citizen. Domestic violence is defined under the California Penal Code as abuse against an individual with whom the abuser has a specified relationship. And those relationships are married or previously married, domestic partners, dating or having been involved in a prior dating relationship, cohabitant or former cohabitant, and with that also has to include some type of intimacy, an intimate relationship. It can't just be roommates in a college dorm, so there has to be some relationship element. And also any 2 individuals that share a child in common. So if you fall under those relationships and you are a victim of some type of assault, you are considered a domestic violence victim. The California Penal Code also defines what laws govern domestic violence. There are 3 main laws. The first one is Section 273.5A of the Penal Code. This is the felony section, although it can be filed as a misdemeanor. And this is defined as corporal injury resulting in a traumatic condition. So this section would apply if somebody had a significant injury, a visible injury, which is what they refer to as a traumatic condition. The misdemeanor section is 243E1, and this is more of a simple battery against an individual that, again, is under that specified intimate relationship. So this could be something as simple as husband pushing his wife. It doesn't require a visible or traumatic injury, but it is still considered a domestic assault. And finally, we have 273.6A of the Penal Code. This is a specific court order section that applies to domestic violence protection orders. So this differs slightly from a standard restraining order violation that you could get against another person. This is specific to a domestic violence protective order, so it protects one of those people that's listed in those defined relationships. The Burbank Police Department has a very extensive policy that governs how we respond to and investigate domestic violence incidents. Just briefly going to cover Policy 320. It details the investigative steps that responding officers should be taking. It provides considerations that the officers should be aware of when they're conducting their investigations. It defines the standards of arrest in domestic violence incidents. It also outlines reporting requirements, and that's covered under 730 of the Penal Code. It explains some procedures for providing assistance to victims of domestic violence, and it also outlines procedures for verifying court orders. Police officers are trained in handling domestic violence incidents from the minute they're in the police academy. They're provided an introduction to what domestic violence is. Once they graduate the academy and they enter the field training program with a field training officer, they begin responding to actual domestic violence incidents. They learn how to conduct those investigations, and they also learn how to document the investigation in the police report. We also receive ongoing in-service training. This is not just for police officers, but also for supervisors. These are ongoing refresher training courses that provide legal updates. They provide insight on best practices with other law enforcement agencies nationwide. And this is something that we participate in on a regular basis. We are also mandated to complete 2 hours of post-training, California Peace Officers Standards and Training, every 2 years. And that training covers our response to domestic violence complaints. I'm going to talk briefly about our dispatch center and what their responsibilities are when they take a 911 call for service involving a domestic violence incident. Domestic violence calls are one of the highest priority calls that we respond to. They require a minimum of 2 units. They will also often require a supervisor to respond. And they are all a Code 3 emergency response, which means we are responding with our lights and sirens, and these are high priority calls, which we usually arrive at within 2 to 2.5 minutes. The dispatchers will also, to assist the officers who are responding, try to obtain some pertinent information. That involves the relationship of the individuals involved, whether or not there are weapons, any injuries, whether or not there are children in the home, the present location of the offender, and they will always try to keep the person that's calling on the line so that they continue to update the officers who are responding. The dispatchers will also check for previous incidents through their dispatch system, especially if there's an address linked a residence or a home. They can look up the address and find out, have we been out there before? If so, what were the details and circumstances of that response? And finally, dispatch will also check to see if there are any valid restraining or court orders in the system so that the officers know what they're dealing with just before they even get there. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the main points that dispatch will consider. As far as the police officers who are responding to these calls, their initial response and their priority will be to detain and separate the involved parties. Obviously, they'll want to secure the scene, safeguard any weapons, and then they'll assess any physical injuries to the victim and make sure that they summon medical aid as needed. Once the scene is secure and things are somewhat static, they'll begin their field investigation. Part of this investigation will obviously involve getting statements from all the involved parties, any witnesses, children. They'll need to identify and collect evidence. They'll determine if a crime has even occurred, and if so, which section would apply, the sections that I introduced you to in the beginning. They'll determine the dominant aggressor. Now, this is defined in Section 13701 of the Penal Code. California discourages making dual arrests, and when I say dual arrests, that means arresting both suspect and victim. Sometimes we'll have an incident where one alleges they were pushed by the other, and that person alleges, well, I was also pushed by her or him. California discourages arresting both parties, although it has happened. They encourage us to identify what we refer to as the dominant aggressor, and we base that on evidence, statements, and witness accounts. Once a crime has determined that a crime has been committed and the dominant aggressor has been identified, they will make an arrest as appropriate if the offender is still on scene. They'll need to remove any firearms from the residence, and then they'll offer the victim their opportunity to obtain an emergency protective order. And if they so choose, the officer will actually obtain that order on their behalf. The order is usually valid for 7 days, and it's granted by a judge. Finally, they'll take photographs and video of the scene as necessary. Some additional steps to consider is once the report is concluded, the officers will always provide the victims with domestic violence information and referral information for seeking resources. And I'll show you an image in a minute of what that looks like. And also information on victims' rights, which was passed in 2008, commonly referred to as Marshy's Law. They'll provide the victim with information about advocates, emergency shelters, community resources that are available to them. They'll obviously ensure the victim and any children in the home have a safe place to go and stay, and they will help facilitate that if necessary. We've often driven victims to family members' homes, even if it's out of city. And then they'll cross-report the incident to the Department of Children and Family Services if there are any children involved or in the home or even part of the family. So if a child is not actually home when the incident occurs, but there is a child in common, we will still report that to the Department of Children and Family Services. I know it's hard to see on the screen, but this is a scan-in of the victim resource card that we provide. It is double-sided, and we do have it in multiple languages, including Spanish and Armenian. And this has direct addresses and phone numbers for several of our local shelters in town. It also provides instructions on how victims can sign up for LA County's Vine service. This is a big one. This is so that they can register to be notified when the offender is released from custody. So they will actually be notified by phone if the person bails out. So there's instructions on here for that. And also just some other literature that would be beneficial for the victims of domestic violence. And I do have I know you're here, but the others aren't, but I do have a hard copy if it's something you'd like to take a look at in person. The Marshy's Law pamphlet, again, just a lot of information on the Marshy's Law. This is one iteration. This is from the state of California. The ones we carry are actually more of a trifold brochure that the officers have, and they provide, and these are actually provided to any victim, not just victims of domestic violence. Once the officers have completed their investigation, they'll make sure that they upload and archive their body-worn camera footage. They'll upload any videos to our database evidence.com. They'll need to book any tangible and physical evidence, and then they'll complete a police report which will include a domestic violence header. Now what this is a list of, it's almost like a checklist. Number one, it helps the officers to ensure that they've checked every box that they need to by law, but it also provides a quick reference for the detectives who get the case and also prosecutors. Again, I have a printout of what that looks like, but it essentially documents the relationship and length of relationship, whether or not children were involved and witnessed it, whether or not alcohol or drugs were a factor, if there were any previous domestic violence calls, and if so, what those report numbers are, whether or not we provided the domestic violence referral card, if there were weapons involved, and whether or not the victim requests confidentiality. Once the report is completed, it is forwarded to the Investigations Division for review and criminal filing, which is where I will hand it off to Detective Cristiano Sanchez.
Great, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioner. And good evening online. I'm Detective Cristiana Sanchez. I've been with the department for 15 years. I'm currently assigned to our Investigations Bureau and specifically to our Crimes versus Persons. And one of the components that we handle are domestic violence cases. So I lost the PowerPoint. So one of the first things that we do when we get the domestic violence case, within the first day or a couple of days after the incident, depending on when it occurred, we recontact the victim. We want to verify the statement, talk to them. Obviously, these incidents are very emotionally charged, like Lieutenant Green had said, and sometimes in a calmer situation after the offender has been taken away or is out of the house and the victim feels safe, we can get a more clear statement of what occurred. We update them on the case, what's going on with the suspect's status. If they were arrested, where it is in the process of being prosecuted, or at the city attorney's office or the DA's office. If they weren't arrested, what our investigation looks like, what we're looking for, if there's any information they could provide us on maybe locating the suspect and getting them apprehended. One of the other things that we talk about are the restraining orders. If an emergency protective order was issued to them, as Lieutenant Green said, it only lasts 7 days for them. So we want to make sure that they're getting in to get a restraining order, or we can assist them with that. A lot of times that will occur with the filing of the case, if the case does get filed. But if not, we want to obviously encourage them to go ahead and look into getting a restraining order if they want one. We also confirm that they did get the emergency protective order, and if they didn't, then we assist them in how to do so if they would like one. If they do have one, or they have a restraining order already in place, we want to make sure that to encourage them that if there's any additional violations, a lot of times the offenders will come to jail and they will immediately start calling the victim. So we want to make sure that the victims are either telling the detective or reporting it, if they're no longer in the city of Burbank, reporting those violations of the restraining order. The next step that we take is we take all of those items that Lieutenant Green talked about, the body-worn camera, the 911 calls, and all the evidence, and we present it to the prosecutor for review. We'll go into a little bit more depth on the next slide. In the next step would be the suspect could plea. The charges could be dropped depending on what the case looks like, what evidence is presented, or the case may go to trial. So for the prosecution, Lieutenant Green talked about the felony cases, 273-5. Some of those cases are reviewed by the district attorney's office, specifically our victim impact program, or we call VIP program, for filing. Sometimes they are referred to the city attorney. There's a list of items that may determine that it's a direct referral to our city attorney's office. For the misdemeanor cases, they go directly to and are autofiled to our city attorney for the domestic violence cases, as well as if the DA looks at the case and says that they would like it to be referred over to the city attorney for misdemeanor charges versus the felony charges. So this is not the full list of what can occur if a suspect is convicted of domestic violence. One of the things are gun ownership bans, 10 years up to a lifetime, jail or prison sentences, depending on the type of conviction that is made, probation, no contact order or restraining orders. There may be fees associated with that. Mandatory domestic violence programs or classes, and community service. Again, this isn't the full list, but these are some of the primary things that could occur or come along with convictions. Challenges. So one of the biggest challenges for us is obviously with going into these emotionally charged situations is officer safety. Lieutenant Green talked about the dispatchers getting that type of information before we're going. How many children are in the house? Are there weapons in the house? Has this happened before? Some of those things are really important as the officers are responding, so we know what we're walking into or how we need to prepare or how many officers we need to send, because these are some of the most volatile and officer safety situations that we go into. Another one that we come across are uncooperative or reluctant victims and or witnesses. There's a lot of emotions involved, and sometimes the victims don't want to pursue charges, and so it's very challenging to encourage them or to talk to them about keeping themselves safe. And so that can be a big challenge for us to make sure that we're getting the right information and that we're connecting them with the right resources so that they have the support system, especially if they're from out of town or they don't have friends or family around, that we want to make sure that they have the support system from not only the police department, but the different resources that we have available to provide to them so that they can look into those things. A lot of times we will get conflicting statements, whether it's from the suspect and the victim or from a witness. We want to make sure that we sort out those conflicting statements. We do our best on the detective side to see if there's any video footage available or any independent witnesses, because that can sometimes help clarify the victim and the suspect's statements to see and find the truth sometimes in the middle of it. The recidivism. So on our side, we see, not too often, but a lot of times we see repeat offenders, or we see 1 week the female half will be arrested, and then a month or two later the male half will be arrested. And so we become challenged with the prosecution on finding a lot of the truth, because we're constantly battling between what's going on, and sometimes we have to arrest both of them. That's obviously not what we want to do, but sometimes we're going out there trying to figure out who the dominant aggressor is, and sometimes that's hard when we're going out there pretty regularly. We obviously try and provide them with the best resources and try and find them safe places to stay, but they oftentimes find themselves back in the same location. And then lastly, the abuse of the system. With the law, a lot of times they know that us coming out there for a domestic violence situation, they know what to say to get their other half arrested, whether it's the male or the female. They know what to say, or they know that they have a restraining order, and they don't always use it. You'll talk to the neighbor and be like, "Oh, he's been here all week," but today they're going to, they don't see eye to eye, and they're calling us to have him arrested. And so it becomes very challenging for us when we have an independent witness, the neighbor saying that the female or the male half who's restrained from there has been there all week, and now they want them arrested. So when it goes to prosecution, they're looking at it as, well, why were they there all week and today you're calling? So that becomes a challenge for us as well. And then lastly, we have a graph here of our statistics. So this graph shows our total arrests for domestic violence. It shows our felony arrests in blue and our yellow, or the misdemeanor arrests in yellow. It is from most recent, which is 2021, is going to be on the left side, and then 2016 on the right. And then it shows total. So as you can see from reading from right to left, from 2016 to 2021, we do have somewhat of a downward trend of domestic violence arrests. And it shows, again, the difference between the misdemeanor and the felony arrests. And I'm going to hand back off to Lieutenant Green.
Thank you.
So looking at these numbers quickly before I go to the next slide, when you consider that the Burbank Police Department generates between 12 and 13,000 police reports each year, and you're looking at 110 total arrests for domestic violence in the year 2020, what that tells you is, do we have domestic violence incidents in the city of Burbank? We do. Are they extraordinary? Are we responding to them every 5 minutes? No, we're not. They are a small percentage of the investigations and arrests that we make in the city of Burbank, which is a good thing. But I wanted to point that out. So we'll go to the next slide, and I think this is something that kind of got us here tonight. This is a slide about the DART program, or the Domestic Abuse Response Team. Now, this is a Los Angeles Police Department model, so the information here obviously is taken from their website. And it is basically a co-response model that pairs victim advocates with specially trained police officers to respond and assist victims of domestic violence. According to the website, they're generally available Thursday through Sunday and business hours Monday through Thursday. And essentially what happens is once a scene is static and the initial response is concluded, the DART team will get involved and reach out to the victim with their willingness to cooperate and provide support and assistance in order to connect them and their families with domestic violence service providers. And some of the services that are listed include counseling, educational information, emergency shelter, safety planning, and legal assistance. Now, this is something that we do not currently have in the city of Burbank. The Burbank Police Department is no stranger to a co-response model, though. We have always kind of been at the forefront of contemporary policing. I'll use the MET team, the Mental Health Evaluation Team, as a prime example. That became a model for essentially all Southern California agencies, but it really started here in Burbank. So this is certainly not something that we are opposed to. Whether or not we have enough domestic violence incidents to justify staffing something like this, that's left to be, we need to look at that. Again, the numbers I showed you in the previous slide show that although we do have domestic violence in the city of Burbank, it's not an astronomical amount. But this is something that has been brought to our attention through the commission and something that we are looking at and exploring as a possibility here in the city of Burbank. So with that being said, I will, either myself or Detective Sanchez, be happy to open it up for some questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant Green and Detective Sanchez. Is there any comments from the commissioners? Okay. Commissioner Liu?
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Green and Detective Sanchez, for running through the process from beginning to end. I really appreciate that. In terms of the incidents of domestic violence, do you have a sense of what percentage of those reports result in pleas versus dropped charges versus trial? Just getting a sense of what the typical or what the spread of outcomes are for these reports?
Well, not every report we take when it comes to domestic violence is a crime report. Let me explain that real quick. We are required by law to document every single domestic violence response. However, it's not always a crime. It could just be an argument that's overheard by somebody, a neighbor hears yelling next door, and we determined that there was no physical element, but it's still a domestic incident for reporting purposes. So there are a lot of reports that we take that are not considered crime reports. We classify those as miscellaneous domestic violence investigations. And we even go as far as to have those reviewed just to ensure that we've checked every box and we've get a second set of eyes on it to ensure that we're not missing something. As far as the reports that are reviewed that are crimes and get the charges end up ultimately dropped, I worked these cases back in 2011 to 2015. I don't have a percentage. I'd say the majority, in my experience, were filed. They were filed either as felony or misdemeanor. I would say very few initially were dropped. Now, the end result could have been that the charges get dropped once it gets into the court system. But the initial filing, from my experience, I had filings on almost all my cases. Has it changed a little? Okay. But would you say the majority of cases? Okay. So we're still seeing the majority of cases being filed.
So the majority of cases being filed, and then from there resulting in either pleas or trials.
Yes. So, obviously when we have somebody in custody, especially, we have a timeline to get the case filed. So 48 hours, we want to get that case presented, charges filed in time for arraignment. If the person happens to bail out, then obviously their court date would be down the road. But what ends up happening is we go back to that challenge we spoke of and the reluctancy of victims to want to testify. And that was a very common theme. So by the time it gets into the court system and it comes time to subpoena people to appear in court, the victim wants nothing to do with it, they no-show, and ultimately the case essentially fizzles. It just goes away, and they have no choice but to drop it. We've seen that quite a few times.
And in terms of the challenges that you listed out, I think a lot of those challenges definitely resonate. Which one run of the that were listed, which one result in kind of, it seems like there's a case of recidivism and uncooperative victims or witnesses. Are those kind of the typical reasons for why you might get repeat calls to households? And do you have any sense of areas that might help shore that up, whether it is kind of these somebody that's on the scene who can provide support in the moment, or is there a matter of like, is there any trends in terms of follow-up to get the report from the victim and the timeline that it takes there? I'm wondering if there's an ability to have a greater impact in the moment that would then be able to lead to, more follow through. But I'm curious as to your experience there, if there has been any kind of correlation or trends.
Well, I do think that the officers do a good job of serving as advocates in the moment. Again, in the moment is tough because you are dealing with a very emotionally charged incident that everything's occurring right now. So it's not uncommon to have children crying, to have yelling back and forth while officers are trying to sort all of this out. So the advocacy in the moment is more difficult than, say, when the detective can actually reach out a day or so after this incident, when things have kind of died down a bit. They're able to have more of a conversation with the victim. They can come in to speak to the detective if they'd like. The detective can go out to speak to them. That's kind of where we see we believe the advocacy is most beneficial is shortly after the incident. In the moment's always hard, especially if we're dealing with an arrest and we have somebody that's been handcuffed and seated in a patrol car. And the other thing we see a lot of is the embarrassment factor, right? These are incidents that are happening right here in our neighborhoods. So the neighbors are out looking. It becomes a matter of privacy. I missed a part of your question just because I think there was some internet issue. But I think you asked about which of the challenges, did you ask which one is most challenging, or I missed a little bit of it?
Yeah, I would say which of the challenges kind of lead to the least kind of fruitful outcome. So I know that there was, at the scene, officer safety, sorting out conflicting statements, but then there also seems to be kind of on the other side, recidivism. Which of these tend to result in, number one, more calls, and also just more instances of cases having to be filed?
Well, the one that affects the filing the most is the reluctancy of victims to want to participate in the process. In the moment, obviously, we have no choice but to make an arrest and deem who the dominant aggressor is and remove that person from the residence. Or if they're not in the residence, try to find them, locate them, and place them under arrest wherever they are. It's the reluctancy after the fact, especially if there's alcohol involved. People have time to sober up, if you will, and reflect back, and then they regret their decisions, and it becomes it was not uncommon for me as a detective to, by the time I made my phone call to that victim the next morning, for the suspect to have already bailed out. Oftentimes, it was the victim who posted the bail, and they're back watching TV and everybody's getting along again. That had the most impact on getting a filing, because once the DA knew that, it's almost like everything that happened, the credibility's out the window. So that I would say is the most challenging.
Commissioner Elliman?
Thank you very much for the presentation, Lieutenant and Detective. Based on your experience, the relationship of domestic abuse, violence, and alcohol. The incidents I have witnessed, it's quite often the victim and the aggressor are both under the influence.
Yeah, alcohol or even drugs are a factor in, I don't have an actual hard number, but I'd say 8 out of 10 reports I read as a watch commander. Again, it goes back to that checklist that we have to identify whether or not drugs or alcohol were involved. I'd say 8 out of 10 reports I read, it's a yes. Yeah, there's definitely a correlation there.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Fruzen?
Thank you. Thank you to you both for that presentation. It was really thorough and very informative. Following up on that last response, so you're saying that 8 out of 10 of the domestic violence incident reports had drugs or alcohol involved?
Again, that's an estimation based on, I read dozens and dozens of reports each night. I just, more often than not, alcohol and drugs are a factor.
Okay. I'm just wondering, so do you feel that the services and referrals and that are external to the police department, as well as the policies and so on that you all have adopted, do they in any way address a substance abuse or behavioral health issues, or is there something missing there as one of the causes to kind of get to the root cause of these incidents versus of course handling the situation that's happened, but in terms of trying to prevent and reduce?
Yeah, I can't speak for all of the resources and services that are available. The Family Service Agency of Burbank is one that I'm vaguely familiar with. But yes, to answer your question, there are additional services that relate directly to substance abuse issues. We also spoke about the ramifications for a conviction, anger management, domestic violence classes that are required. It probably wouldn't be uncommon to also see some substance abuse classes involved in there if it was in fact an issue in the incident, or a factor, I should say. So I believe, although I don't know all of the different services that are available, I believe that the substance abuse, it's so prevalent in domestic violence cases that I can't imagine why each of those wouldn't have some additional resource or program to address that.
Commissioner Coombs, I believe you had a question.
Thank you. Lieutenant Green and Detective Sanchez, first, I want to thank you. This topic came up because from a number of different angles. We had a caller from a previous month that called in about this, and there have been a number of situations in Burbank that has really brought this to light, both on social media and things reported by My Burbank and other locations. It got me doing a little bit more diving into this as well, and something jumped out at me that just had me very concerned, and I wanted to spend some of my comments and questions around that. I was looking at some numbers from 2020 nationwide. Firearm deaths were the second leading cause of deaths amongst law enforcement officers, and I don't mean to get morbid here or anything like that. Of those 48 deaths, 7 of them were they were domestic violence calls. And so I wanted to kind of lift up and see if we could spend a little bit of time talking about some of the training and how your officers approach domestic violence calls, because they're so volatile. And unfortunately, you're getting called in at the point where there is violence involved. We would wish that, and we can talk about resources later on that might be able to get involved prior to the implementation of violence. But the piece that I just want to lift up is that domestic violence calls are dangerous for both the people that you're responding to and to the officers involved. And I was wondering if you could spend a few moments to kind of talk about the training, the preparation, and the postvention around that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that these are the most dangerous calls that we respond to. I can't think off the top of my head of one that's more dangerous without some articulating facts to say so. But domestic violence, it's a weird phenomenon. You are responding to a home where a family has hit their wits' end, right? There is some type of serious issue between either domestic partners, husband, wife, whatever the case might be. And we've seen some of these calls where there's almost like the violator has nothing to lose, right? And when you look at some of the deaths in law enforcement that have resulted from responding to domestic violence calls, these offenders were at their wits' end. They had nothing to lose, and they were going to take out everybody with them: wife, kids, police, you name it. So that tells you just how dangerous these calls are. As far as training, like I said, it starts in the police academy. The recruits really don't have a firm grasp of just how dynamic these calls are until they begin responding to the actual calls with their training officer. And not all of them escalate. You know, some of them are, we respond to domestic violence calls involving teens all the way up to the elderly. You know, so there's no age limit when it comes to domestic violence. So not every incident is an exigent situation, but we treat each one as such until we determine otherwise. So it's important that we participate in the ongoing training. We also have done some virtual training where there is, you're faced with some type of dilemma, whether on screen or we're watching the videos through the post-training portal, and we're left to determine the best course of action through a series of questions. It could be everything from how we respond to how we set up on the call to who we believe the dominant aggressor to be. And it actually quizzes us, and you have to pass that as part of the training. So we're always learning, we're always training. The best training is getting our feet wet and actually getting out there and responding to these calls. Like I said, we try to roll a supervisor as often as possible to provide oversight. But yes, there's nothing will ever change. These will always remain very dangerous calls for service.
Something you just said as a side note I want to plug in there, and if it's ever an opportunity for the commissioners as well, I've gotten a chance to participate in some of those training modules with other organizations where they require you to make those decisions. I don't know if it would be an option for commissioners and members of the public to even try out some of those modules sometime, because I think it would actually really lift up how difficult these calls can really be, and kind of it's pretty eye-opening. So keeping with that, once post-incident, I'm wondering what resources, you talked about some of the resources that are provided to folks that are involved, the civilians that are involved in the domestic violence incident. I'm wondering what resources are available to the officers that respond to this, because everything from responding to domestic violence calls to, for you, reviewing domestic violence calls afterwards takes its toll and has an impact over time. I was wondering if you could speak to what types of resources are in place for officers so to help keep an edge but not become jaded with these types of calls.
Yeah, the profession in general, so not just domestic violence, but we have a very strong support system for our officers. We have the peer counseling system. We have a variety of resources available to them, and we're always encouraging officers to speak up if there's something that's bothering them. We've had so many officers will endure so many traumatic events in their career, and it's normal for them to keep this pent up inside, and they want to be strong, and they're police officers, but at the end of the day, we're all human. But we do encourage officers to come forward if they need help. We have the EAP program through the city. We have the wellness. We have the wellness program, which was recently implemented at the station, where we have a group of officers that focus on officer wellness. Am I forgetting? We do have a chaplain program. The chaplains are available not just to the public, but they are available to our officers. In fact, they often go on ride-alongs with our police officers. One of them is riding this coming Saturday night on my shift. And they engage in conversation, and they ask the officers, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is everything going okay? Is there anything you need? And it's a great resource for us to have. So we have a variety of tools in place to address officer wellness and ensure that we are providing them with the help they need, should they need it.
I appreciate that. And again, so I'm hoping people are taking advantage of that. About restraining orders, one of the things that I'm familiar with that the DART program does is out of the Van Nuys courthouse is they actually offer a restraining order workshop for individuals who are experiencing domestic violence they can take action before a violent encounter exists. And so this is something that I'm hoping folks can take advantage of, and the DART program helps with that. I'm assuming that there isn't a location in Burbank that people could engage in a restraining order of that type, or would the recommendation be that they go to the Van Nuys courthouse?
Yeah, that would be the recommendation. Do we have a program similar to that in Burbank? I don't believe we do.
It's
Yeah,
not, it's not far away, and it's
The referral card does have a hotline number for that. And I want to say one thing about the emergency protective order, or a protective order in general. And this is something I used to tell people in the field as a police officer and also as a detective. The reality is a restraining order is a piece of paper. If everybody followed the rules and the rules of the order, everything would be great, but that's just not reality. What we often tell people is beyond the restraining order, they need to take, and we are happy to help, take steps to safeguard themselves. The order allows us to take enforcement authority if they violate it. It tells somebody, you're not to come back here. You know, you're not to be within 100 yards of me. But most of the time, it's just a piece of paper, and unfortunately, people don't always follow the rules. So we also try to help beyond applying for the order. We try to help the victims to ensure that they take the necessary steps to safeguard themselves and their children and family members. I wanted to say that earlier.
Thank you. That actually leads me to my last quick question I'll let up is I'm curious because the gun violence restraining order in California is a relatively new tool and resource. And we've been talking about protective restraining orders, but I'm curious as to how often Burbank Police Department ballpark uses gun violence restraining orders in these types of situations as well.
Well, what I can tell you is that every single report that we write regarding domestic violence, whether it's a crime report or not, we have to articulate whether or not there are any firearms registered to the not just the suspect, but also the victim. And if there are guns in the home, and they are willing to voluntarily relinquish those as what we refer to as safekeeping, then we will take those guns. If there is a need to take them under an authority and they're not willing to, we will get a court order and we will take them that way. But as far as the gun restraining orders, I don't quite understand. You're referring to an actual the surrendering of firearms.
Well, there's actually, in California, there's actually a specific document called the Gun Violence Restraining Order. I believe it comes out of the Attorney General's office, I believe. And what it does is it specifically allows individuals can file for it, departments can file for it, that sort of thing. It's just another tool in the tool belt, if you will, to specifically secure firearms. And again, that goes back to some of the numbers I provided early on about the lethality of firearms in domestic violence situations.
Got it. Do you want to talk about that, or I don't know? I'm missing it. Yeah. Okay. Most commonly, what they're saying behind me is that the attorneys are the ones that usually introduce those. We are very familiar with surrendering of firearms, either by mandate of the court, as a result of a court order or a conviction, or when we're at the homes, taking firearms that way, like I just explained.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think Commissioner Ellman has his hand up. Commissioner Chapman.
Mr. Ellman, Commissioner Ellman, you had another question?
Oh, muted.
Do restraining orders remain valid across state lines? So if somebody's a victim of domestic violence, say in Nevada, and chooses to leave the state and moves to Burbank, if the aggressor follows them, is that restraining order in effect? I'm sorry if it's a legal question.
Yeah, I don't believe it would be enforceable outside of California. Yeah, and likewise, an out-of-state protective order, I don't think that we would enforce here in California. That would be, I'd have to look that out. That's a good question. I don't know that I've ever actually faced that scenario.
Yeah, I just think that sometimes the victim chooses to leave and the person follows. Thank you so much for your answer.
You're welcome.
Okay. Lieutenant, I'd like to ask a few questions. One is that there was a seemingly a downward trend in the number of arrests or calls. Do you have any reasons why that might be?
I don't. These are unique in that it's not a crime that we can necessarily deter through extra patrol or things of that nature. We can certainly provide education to the public, which we often do, not just with this, but with a variety of topics through our social media and our community events. But it's refreshing to see the downward trend for sure, especially having come out of a very tumultuous time with COVID and everything else. I would have expected to see a spike in the numbers, and we saw quite the opposite.
I don't know if this makes a difference, but is the Los Angeles Police Department experiencing the same kind of downward trend?
I don't know what neighboring agencies have experienced as far as numbers go. We are a big city, but we're still a smaller agency. The larger agencies like LAPD, I'm sure that they are, experiencing a larger volume of domestic violence calls. I'm sure the DART team is reflective of that. There's probably a significant need for that to just alleviate some of the burden on the police officers that are responding to these calls for service. But I don't have numbers on what the neighboring agencies have experienced.
All right. On the referrals on the card that you have, by the way, that information along with our department policy is all on the web, is it correct? In those referrals, is there a proactive, the victim or people that are involved are notified of this possibilities? On the other side is like family services, for example, notified of a situation that arose, or is that only by the victim contacting them? Does the department notify family services? We've got some things going on you may want to watch.
We notify Children and Family Services if there is a child involved, not necessarily specifically involved in the incident, but if there is a child involved in the relationship. Even if it's a child from a previous relationship, if there is a child that could potentially be affected by what is going on or was affected, that falls on us. We report that immediately. So we report that within an hour or two of that call for service. It's already reported, and we get a reference number from Children and Family Services, and what they'll do is they will dispatch somebody to conduct their own investigation, usually within 5 days.
And if there's not a child involved, then?
We would not report anything to Children and Family Services. If there were other issues, let's say we're talking about the elderly and there's a neglect element or an abuse element, then we would notify Adult Protective Services. Same thing, right? They would provide us with a reference number, they would assign a caseworker to it, and they would essentially follow up directly with the family. And then if they determine that there's evidence of an additional crime, then we would work with them together to conduct that investigation.
Good. That's all that I have, and it looks like we have one more question. Commissioner Fruzen?
Yeah, so following up on that piece, so if an incident didn't involve either a minor, I guess a minor child, or an elder abuse type of situation, then there's no other party that gets notified. So I'm wondering, as you mentioned, we have a smaller department, and the volume of service calls may be such that doesn't make sense, or it's not feasible to have a DART team per se in Burbank. Do you think that either of these options might be something that works, which is either partnering with some of these, external service agencies, so that when there is an incident and the situation's been stabilized, somebody from that organization gets called in, and they kind of come to the scene and sort of fulfill some of that role, maybe of similar to what's happening on the DART team. Although I appreciate that these organizations, as many are I'm sure chronically under-resourced and overburdened already with the cases that they're handling, or the idea of, as part of the follow-up that happens either by the patrol officer or the investigator to reach out to one of those organizations. I think kind of what Commissioner Chapman, Chair Chapman was alluding to. So it's kind of a two-way thing. So one, the victim involved gets the pamphlet with services, but also from the other side, someone's getting notified and maybe then proactively reaches out to the victim maybe the next day or a couple days later, as you're saying, maybe, in the moment isn't the most helpful. And I guess, are there privacy concerns with that? Would the victim have to consent to the release of their information? And, how does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. The victim has to be willing to participate in any type of intervention efforts, because there is that privacy element, the confidentiality element. All of our reports get stamped with the confidential stamp when it's a domestic violence, or at least they have in the past. But I have been part of several counseling interventions over at the Family Service Agency of Burbank on Burbank Boulevard. And these all come after the fact. And these were a result of us essentially working with the victim and cross-reporting these incidents to provide additional resources for them. It focused more on rehabilitation as opposed to, punitive. So if you have we've seen domestic violence cases with two very polite individuals who have gotten along for 50 years married, and all of a sudden they have one bad night and things get a little out of hand. Those situations, we do want to focus more on rehabilitation and ensuring that this doesn't happen again. And the way we do that is by, like Detective Sanchez says, number one, it all starts with reaching back out to the victim, touching base with them, having a conversation. Is there anything you need? Can we help you? A lot of times, if we don't ask, they'll tell us what they need. And then it comes back to the list of resources that we have available, and we can facilitate that, and we can work with them to get them the appropriate help that they need. So we do make those calls, and we do mediate and facilitate the assistance and provide services here and there. It doesn't happen in every case. And quite frankly, the victims aren't always willing. But when they are, we are more than willing to advocate for them and get them that help.
Good. Well, Commissioner Habakovian?
Thank you, Commissioner Chapman. Thank you, Lieutenant Green and Detective Sanchez, for this presentation. It was extremely informative. I just have two quick questions. The first question is, the calls that are coming in, the domestic violence calls, are they, do you guys have a percentage or a rough idea of, are they coming from the neighbors that are hearing these incidents happening, or is it from the victims themselves? Like, is there like a percentage of, what that looks like?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I have to base it off experience. I'd say quite a few come from the outside. So these are people that either witness an altercation or hear an altercation, and sometimes we get there and it isn't what they thought it was. But I'd say more often than not, we're getting calls from outside of the home. A neighbor. We had one last weekend. I can't remember the exact location, but it was a passerby that sees what appeared to be a domestic assault occurring inside of a vehicle, and that's common. So we do get quite a few that originate from outside. In fact, I'd probably go out on the limb and say the majority are calls that originate from outside of the home or from people that are witnessing it.
Thank you very much for that. And is there anything that we should know as a community of how we should respond to if we do see this visually happening, or we hear something? Is there anything that we should do, or how we should proceed?
Yeah, like with any crime in progress or suspicious activity, just be the best witness you can be. We're gonna need to speak with you and gather information on exactly what you saw, especially if if in a domestic violence case, we're trying to determine who the dominant aggressor is. The witness's statement is probably going to be the one we go with, because they're uninvolved. They're not biased in any way, shape, or form. So if they say he punched her, and she's saying, no, he never touched me, we're probably going to go with the independent witness's statement to deem that person the dominant aggressor. So the witness is actually very important in these cases for us, and it comes back to unraveling those conflicting statements and trying to determine, who the dominant aggressor was. Because at the end of the day, we are going to deprive somebody of their freedom, and we want to make sure that we get it right.
Thank you so much.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Lieutenant Green and Detective Sanchez, for your presentation this evening. It was very.
James.
Whoop, am I missing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Coombs?
Commissioner Chair, again, thank you, Lieutenant Green and Detective Sanchez. It's a tough and it's a challenging topic. Honestly, I wish that our law enforcement didn't have to be involved in domestic violence in the first place. These are the things that happen when conflicts result in violence and go to that extreme. So I'm kind of hoping that people would have more resources available to them. Just as a comment, some of the work that I do, we've seen a decrease in child abuse reporting over the pandemic, and a large reason for that is because kids weren't in school. Now that they're getting back into school, my understanding is that numbers are starting to go back up. I'm also wondering if some of the decrease in numbers over the past couple of years may unfortunately be as a result of the pandemic as well, because there aren't as many eyes on the situation that may be reporting in. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility. Because one of the things that I deal with is I deal with rates per capita. And it's always good to see the numbers go down, but when we start to see significant trends and we don't have an intervention, why it always has me concerned is maybe collectively, societally, we're missing something. If it's okay, Commissioner Chapman, I had a couple of additional resources that I wanted to offer up, just so everybody has them and are aware of them. Would that be okay?
I think that would be excellent.
Great. So again, about the DART program, in addition to everything that LAPD does, specifically I mentioned the DART program and their restraining order workshop based out of Van Nuys. That number, and anybody can access this. The number is 818-374-0078. And I'm going to provide all of this information to both Commissioner Turner and also Ms. Nakamura. One of the things that comes up that we deal with as well is sometimes folks don't want to report because of cultural identity issues. So I've got a couple of specific resources I wanted to offer up. There's an organization called the Center for the Pacific Asian Family. These folks respond to domestic violence issues as well as a counseling agency. Their number is 800-339-3940. There is also the Chicana Service Action Center at 800-548-2722, and three more actually. Jewish Family Services of Los Angeles has a pretty robust program, and their number is 818-505-0900. There is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 800-799-SAFE or 7233. And lastly, we can all call 211 because they have access to all those resources as well. Appreciate the work that you all are doing. Again, wish that there was a way to keep officers in the community safer in these types of situations, and appreciate taking the opportunity to have this conversation this evening.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. All right. I think we move on now to general announcements by the Chief Albanese.
Good evening, Commissioners. I hope you all are doing well and really appreciated the presentation and your commentary and your insight. Very sophisticated. I'm going to make a recommendation for January. If you can agendize, there is a new crime reporting system that becomes official January 1st, 2022. It's called NIBRS, and it's the National Incident-Based Reporting Systems. And this is a game changer for all of law enforcement. This is a national reporting system that is going to codify how we report all crimes. It is more complicated, and it's going to get more information regarding any type of crimes or associated crimes. So I would ask that you consider agendizing that. I'd have our records manager, Jennifer Moran, provide the commission a tutorial on this new system because it's going to impact crime. The crime numbers that we see right now is going to look very different January 1. And there's an expanded explanation. In fact, the FBI that provides oversight of what used to be called the UCR, Uniform Crime report is going to be very different, and FBI also is providing a press kit, information kit for not only the community but for the media, because the numbers are going to look very different. One of the commissioners talked about the community survey. I just want to highlight again is that the community survey is open till Monday, November 22nd. It's done in English, Armenian, and Spanish. We would encourage all community members to take the survey, give us input so that we can be more efficient and more effective and moving forward. Some just notable events that have that I participated in the last few weeks. We had a recruit graduation on November 5th. We had 4 brand new officers graduate from the LA County Sheriff's Department's Academy. That was a big deal for us. And then later in the afternoon, myself and Captain Kremens did a tiny homes tour in North Hollywood. And this is for transitional housing. We had actually had some folks that had been homeless, unhoused here in the city of Burbank that have been placed in this transitional housing. So that was informative and helpful. The commissioners, and I believe it was Forensen Coombs and Mike Chapman that showed up Monday for our ceremony. I wanted to personally thank you all. I think I thanked you that night, but again, a personalized thanks, because that is a big, big deal, very solemn event, and please always remember their families. So we have another recruit graduation that'll occur December 17th. We have one officer that'll be graduating from the Sheriff's Department. And then we're going to sponsor a holiday event. Not sure how that's going to look. If you recall, last year there was not much festivities going on because of COVID, and we did a drive-through holiday event. We had a collaboration with Kiwanis and some of our other foundations. This year we have our Burbank Police Officers Association, our Burbank Police Foundation, and we're going to hopefully collaborate with Kiwanis and the department, and also Burbank Housing, and perhaps do another drive-through celebration where we can share some goodies with some folks and do some outreach. However, we don't have a date and time. So I'll make sure that Ms. Nakamura reaches out to you all to let you know when we will have that. Last year, if you recall, it was a drive-through the back of the police station. We had a couple stations where we were able to hand off some gifts and holiday stuff. And actually, considering the circumstances, it was a very good outcome. So as far as reporting out and updates, that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Chief.
You got it.
I do have a.
You got it.
The presentation for LIBOR, is that something that we should clear only just that item for that evening?
No, I think the presentation, we're probably looking at about a 15-minute presentation. There may be questions the commissioners will ask, because it's going to be new and foreign, because it's not traditional crime reporting. Typically, we're used to seeing crimes up 2 or 3% or crimes down 3 or 4 or 5%. It's a whole new dynamic. It's a very sophisticated and complicated system as far as reporting that archives all of this data. We met earlier today. We believe that a PowerPoint, about a 15-minute PowerPoint would be fine.
All right. Let me get some response from our commissioners here. In looking at our next few months, first of all, maybe we should decide and confirm that, well, let me tell you, in the past, normally the commission has not met in December. And I want to make sure that we're in line with that. Can I just get a quick nod that we will pass on December? Our next meeting will be in January. Is that good? All right. So then, what comes up then is how do we schedule our items that we have for the agenda? Do we want to continue to have the Senate Bill discussion, Senate Bill 2 discussion, along with the LIBOR the same evening in January, or move it up to a little bit farther in the schedule? And Commissioner Coombs, I saw your hand up there. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Chapman. I was going to ask that of Chief Albanese. SB2 is about, it's an accountability database, and I'm wondering if that might go okay with the NIBOR discussion in the same meeting, or I'm wondering if you think that might be too much.
I think both are doable if you just limit it to those two, and it's NIBORs. NIBORs and SB2, I think that we'll be able to get through it. So it's NIBRS.
RS, okay. Second quick question is the community survey. When do the results of the community survey become available?
So I'm not that conversant with the process as far as you figure that it's completed November 22nd, and where's the holding pattern of the data, and then how does that look, and then who looks at the data? I don't know, but what I can tell you is in January, and I believe it's January 19th is when we would have our next police commission meeting, is that we can give you an update as far as has it been collated, codified, has it gone through the Cuisinart mixer, and I am being told and being directed by Ms. Nakamura that we will be prepared for February's police commission meeting to do a report out on the survey.
Fantastic. And I have a sneaking suspicion this is a group that likes numbers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Commissioner Fruzen? You had your hand up there? Yes.
I just wanted to clarifying question on the new data reporting system. Does that in any way impact, or just how does that relate to the requirements around reporting data with race, ethnicity that again some of the larger departments are already doing? But
Commissioner, I think what we need to do is two things. Is we need to stick with what we're agendizing and kind of limit our discussion outside of that so that we can focus at the proper time for that.
I guess it's more just a yes or no. Does that play into it, or like just to anticipate if that'll be an element of discussion in January versus this is doesn't concern that legislation.
Does anybody have a proposal? Can I make one here? That we be dark in January, a motion, that we be dark in December, excuse me, and in January, then add to our agenda Senate Bill number 2 and the NIBOR, and then in February that we have the community survey that was agendized by Commissioner Liu. Is that something I could get a second on?
I'll second that.
Good. Okay. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay. Everybody in favor? Good. Great. Perfect. I think we're all set. Okay. All right. And now we are adjourned. Thank you.